Hey guys, welcome to the Friday night live stream of the Adventure Photo Show. I'm Steve Reichert and I am really excited to be with you talking all about photography and having fun with the camera, telling stories and going on adventures. And I do this live stream every Friday night, complete with a gesticulation camera for effect. And every Friday night I bring a little topic that I want to talk about, and I try to also take all your questions and comments, and usually we go on for as long as the party is going and people are interested. And as I mentioned, this channel is all about having fun with the camera, photography, video, all of that good stuff. And I was thinking about it today as I was making a channel trailer. And good evening to those of you who joined this evening, Daniel and King Yuzi I see in here already. And I was thinking about it on the channel trailer, and it's like if Ken is the angry photographer, my goal at least, and I guess I could you know, just go for it in without being too self-conscious as being the unpretentious photographer. I'm really just in it for fun, and because I really honestly do love photography, and I love the places that it takes me, I love the friends that it has connected me to, including you, and so I'm glad you're here. So what I wanted to do tonight, just to start things off a little bit, I've made a lot of videos on this channel, certainly with and about various Fuji cameras. In fact, yesterday I published a video detailing my use of the X100F, and I got a video, or I'm sorry, I got a comment on one of my videos from a gentleman named Brian Mercado, who wanted to know what my thoughts were about the new Fuji X-E3. And so I'm not going to go on super long about that, but I just wanted to share a couple of reactions and thoughts that I had about that camera. And ultimately, I can say, just to start with, it looks like an amazing camera, and I'm not surprised by that. It seems like it's got a lot of meat on the bone, and Fuji have been doing a really good job of releasing cameras that have awesome image quality. And they are starting to branch out into the world of video and start to accommodate people like myself who shoot both video and stills. I think that ultimately what I think about any camera, and to be very clear right up front, I have not used this camera. I'm just giving some just random thoughts based on my look at the specs and my experience with other similar cameras, including the X100F T, and the X Pro 1, and also of course the XT2 and the XT10, and a handful of those cameras. So from a specs perspective, I would say that it looks fantastic, and it's really hard to say that anything bad about their cameras. But I think that ultimately my thoughts about a camera ultimately comes down to what you're shooting and where you're shooting it. You know, there's more to making a good camera than just saying it has impressive specs, because pretty much every camera that has been released by any company in the last however long has had some pretty impressive specs, and they've also had some that maybe are not as useful, but it's not because they don't have enough specs, it's because you need a specific set of specs that fit what you're doing. And I think budget plays a huge part in that as well. So for $899, which is what it's listing at, it seems like it has most of the features of the XT2 and the XT20 and even the X Pro 2, but at a much lower price tag. And I can tell you that this is it was about a year ago that I bought the XT2, and if the XE3 had been around when I bought the XT2, I probably wouldn't have bought the XT2, and probably would have bought the XE3, because it's pretty amazing. Based on looking at the specs. Now, if you have $2,000 to spend on a system, yeah, it's great. Now, of course, and this isn't the question exactly that I was asked, but for my money, if somebody said, I got like $1,200 or $900 or $1,000, I would say get an X Pro 1 or an XT1 and get some old vintage glass and adapt it. And that is one of the things, I'm going to do a video about this shortly, I promise, but I've been adapting Pentax M42, the screw mount lenses, onto my GH5. And if you go to my Twitter page, just, I know it's like really unseemly and unbecoming, this lens. It's a 200mm f5.6. I got it for like $40 on eBay, and I took a really cool picture, or I think it's pretty cool, of this really fat woodchuck, and it's on my Twitter at Living Vertical if you're interested in that. But the best value in lenses, I think, comes from getting old lenses and adapting them and not being afraid of manual focus. And you can get a beautiful rig for like $500, $600, camera and lenses, if you just are not scared of having to, you know, turn the little knob on the barrel yourself. You can have yeah, wood chunk. It was super fat woodchuck. I came out of my porch and I saw this thing in the lawn. I was like, I got a lens for you, buddy. So I ran in and, you know, and I shot it all handheld and manual focus, and I was impressed with the results on like a, you know, 40-something-year-old lens that I got for $30 on eBay. And this lens, and I'm going to get back to the X-E3 in a second, just bear with me. This lens is also Fuji, so I'm maintaining my brand credibility here. This is the 135 f3.5, and this lens here is sharp as a tack, and I got it also for $30. So you could get you know, a handful of lenses. The only, you kind of miss out on the wide lenses because you can't really go any wider than 24, and then once you put that on the APS-C, right, you're going to have some crop factor in there. But I'm really into I'm really into saving money on gear as much as possible. And King Uzi says found loads of 80 to 210 Nikon lenses on eBay for about $20. Old Canon FD mounts. There's a ton of awesome vintage glass that if you're just not afraid of manual focus, you can really have some fun and save a lot of money. And I think that saving money is also part of having fun, at least with what I'm doing in adventure photography. Anyways, just to wrap things up, a couple things I wanted to point out about the X-E3 that I thought were noteworthy. I made some notes. I hope you'll forgive me for not keeping this all in my head, because I've been studying biology and chemistry, and I just finished my psychology exam a few moments ago. Things that stood out to me, like I said, it's got all the good stuff, the meat on the bone from the X-T2 and the X Pro 2. And it looks to me like they are testing out some of the technology that they want to use in future flagship models, but they're doing it with a lower penalty by putting it on a lower price, kind of more consumer model, rather than trotting it out on, you know, the flagship model, and then people get pissed because they don't like this or they don't like that. The things that looked really good that I noticed specifically from the older the X-T2 and the X Pro 2 were the customizable continuous autofocus and the tracking system that they have on there. And good evening, Queen of San Joaquin, good to see you here. The EVF and the image display, so you can shoot through the EVF, and then when you take it away from your face, you know, you take the camera away, you can shoot continuously, and then when you take it away, the image review pops up after you've stopped shooting, so kind of giving you some dual function there. And that's something that they did for the X-T2 after they did that in, I think, one of the last firmware updates. So awesome to see all of that stuff. They're not holding anything back, with the exception of maybe weather sealing. And there's a jack, an external jack for a microphone if you're going to shoot video, and I'll speak for a moment about the video side of this, but the new things that they're doing on the X-E3 that look really exciting to me, again from a specs perspective, I have not shot this myself, but we know their image quality is going to be good with the X-Trans 3 sensor. Makes beautiful images, which thank you for those of you who've watched my X100F video and have commented on those photos. I've been very happy with the results so far myself too. But anyways, we know good image quality out of Fuji. The touchscreen, and there's no D-pad, so no directional pad on the back. There's only, well, there's the four buttons, and this is a GH5, so this isn't going to give you exactly, but like if you see that kind of the amount of space that directional pad, the D-pad takes up, they got rid of that completely. And one of my big complaints, not really a complaint, I mean, I have to look pretty hard to find a complaint about the X100F, but one of the things that, if I were going to complain about it, which I feel obligated to in order to be credible, just a little bit anyways, like on a small camera, that little bit of real estate where you put your thumb when you're gripping the camera makes a big difference. And with the D-pad gone, there's just like this nice big blank area for you to just hold the camera without having to worry about bumping stuff or changing settings. Plus, it is super exciting to see Fuji joining the club that Panasonic has been actively participating in for several years now, which is the realization that touchpads and touch technology is outstanding, and it's not something to be afraid of with respect to still photography. It's not something that's only for those idiot vloggers that are doing selfie mode stuff. It's, you know, and I think that the same will soon be said of the flip screen when they get to that point. So the touchscreen, being able to move focus points around super easy, not having to monkey around with the joystick, although you can, but you have duality with touchscreen and joystick, similar to what they have on the GH5 that I have praised very highly. I think it's an outstanding feature. And then the other thing that looks new from everything else that I saw is the auto transfer to phone. So you can set it up with Bluetooth connectivity now instead of Wi-Fi, which incidentally the Panasonic also has that on the GH5, although to be fair, it's twice the dollars for the GH5. And I'm not comparing these cameras because the GH5 and the the Panasonic and the Fuji line, they're very different in a lot of ways, and they both have their special place in my heart. But being able to shoot and have it transfer, kind of an auto transfer to your phone, so that if you're shooting a bunch of stuff, you just like turn it on, connect it basically, and it just dumps everything over to your phone, to your camera roll, so you can upload to Instagram or edit on the mobile Lightroom app. Super, super handy stuff. And as always, Fuji is, very cognizant of what their users are interested in and what they want. And the people who are like, no touch screens, no tilt screens, we want fixed old screens with no touch capabilities. Well, the future is here, and one of the things, they are still, adding their video features into the X-E3. It's got 4K video. It looks quite good as most of the image quality does on the video. It does raw, uncompressed out, and you don't have to get the battery grip to hook in the microphone, which is a nice thing. Or, well, the microphone, you need the battery grip. Actually, I don't know about a battery grip for the X-E3. I'm just mentally kind of comparing it with the X-T2, but that's no different than the X-T2. The X-T2, you needed the battery grip to be able to monitor the audio separately with headphones, and I don't know about and again, I haven't used it, it's not like super in-depth, but just looking at the specs, it's really exciting from a stills perspective. It looks like this is kind of like they're kind of starting to seriously bridge the gap, and it's like you could see them approaching that with the X-T2, where they have the articulating screen but still doesn't have touch capabilities, and now this one doesn't have the articulating screen but it does have touch capabilities, and they're dabbling with a few different things, and I think that's wise. That's cool, because ultimately what happens is you're able to get fully baked features and put them into the flagship models rather than testing new features on a flagship model. And yes, in-body image stabilization will be coming to Fuji. Thank God. And maybe by the time I finish nursing school and I have a job and I can afford to buy a Fuji flagship camera, I will get the X-T2S or X-T3 or whatever they have that has touchscreen and the in-body image stabilization, and basically puts effectively the good things that we love about the GH5 and put those with a Fuji sensor, creating the brainchild or love child between Panasonic setup and Fuji technology, and it would be really, really awesome. So those are my thoughts on the X-E3. If I had no camera and I were starting out and it was in my budget, if I had about $2,000 to spend, and I say $2,000 because if you're starting out, you need to have other things in addition, like carrying system. You need to have storage. You need to have data storage, and I'm going to do a video about that in the future. You need to have memory cards. You need to have, you may need to have some filters, maybe a tripod. And obviously, dare I forget, you need to have lenses. So I would say for $1,500 to $2,000, you could fully outfit yourself with the X-E3 and be completely satisfied with it. I would say that if you sent me out to take photographs with the X-E3 or the X-T2, I would be hard-pressed to find a situation in the way that I shoot where you would be able to look at my photos when I came back the next day and be like, oh, this one is clearly better. You must have paid $2,000 for this camera body, whereas, oh, that one, you just paid $900. I can tell the photo. It's like, you know, you're going to get a huge amount of value out of it. And I think, to be fair, though, the same could be said in terms of the value that you get out of, you know, a $300 camera like the X Pro 1 with the right lenses and the right attitude. So there you go. Those are my thoughts about the X-E3. Now, just to catch up with a few questions that I've gotten here over the last couple minutes. King Yuzi asked what the battery life is like on the X100F. So, and there's one more gripe I forgot to mention about the X100F that I will put out there as well. The on-off switch on the X100F, it's like the profile of that little knob where you flip this power on and off. It's just a little bit too small. In shaving down the size and the weight, they went just a little bit too far. And so you kind of have to, it sounds ridiculous, but you have to try a little bit harder when you're turning the power on and off on the X100F. So that's something that sounds minor, but it's kind of annoying, especially when you're doing a lot of on and off stuff. But the battery life specifically on the X100F, I took 2 batteries and 2 memory cards, and I filled pretty much both of the memory cards. Actually, I don't know if I filled both of the memory cards, but I shot somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,200 pictures, and I think with the memory card I was using, I think I shot like almost 2 memory cards full, like was it 264s or 232s? I think 232s is what I had. So almost 64 gigs of photos, and I'm not even going to try to do the math because it would be embarrassing, and it wouldn't be very embarrassing to me and not very useful to you. But on a full day of shooting, 2 batteries, and still had some left over on the ride home from the second battery. And I spent a lot of time on the ride home just goofing around with like the 5100 or 51,800 ISO settings just to see what I could do with super high ISO handheld shots, and those are in the video that I published yesterday, a review, that real world review of the X100F. And granted, you know, I was still using like 1/30th of a second shutter speed. Even, you know, this is shooting in the dark as we're driving home, taking pictures of Martin, who's sitting next to me driving, and with that super high ISO, I was still able to, you know, capture shots with a little bit of motion blur. But that, to me, I mean, what I at 51 thing is we should be back. Oh, we are back. Yeah, what happened there? Looks like my feed got interrupted. Yeah. Anyways, so that those kind of starting off there, that was, if you're just kind of tuning in, feed just broke. Part 1, we talked about the X-E3, and now we're just talking about whatever. And for me personally, I have been on a kick, and some of you that I am in contact with on Twitter and on some of my other social media pages and outlets, I have been really stoked on the vintage glass, and specifically Fuji. And I didn't even realize that Fuji made M42 screw mount lenses, and the 135 millimeter with the speed booster is just fantastic. I mean, it is super sharp and really nice. And $30. I got this from KEH, And I haven't seen a lot of these bouncing around, but when they are available, they seem to go relatively cheap. And I haven't had a chance to really test these lenses in great depth yet because I am here and I'm in, you know, my daughter isn't here, so I don't have anybody to really shoot and kind of have model for me. Plus, I also have been pretty busy with school. So that's taken a little bit of time. But I'm actually, after this live stream tonight, I'm going to be heading a 3-hour drive to Massachusetts, and I'm going to go back and see my daughter and my wife, see the family, which will be nice. Haven't seen them for a while. Manny Rosenberg. Wow, 2 weeks in a row. Good to see you back, Manny. I think, I don't know what EMA stands for, so you can fill me in on that, and depending on how serious you're being, I will try to answer your question, or I will ignore it and keep moving, depending on what it is that you're actually asking me. I have a 100% comment response policy on my channel, and that even bleeds over into these live streams for the most part, and I will maintain that policy as long as I possibly can, because you never know. I actually had one person who left a somewhat disparaging comment on one of my videos today, and I actually kind of, you know, gave him a sort of witty response, but that wasn't too snarky, wasn't too mean, and he actually got a kick out of it, and we wound up having a nice conversation, kind of, you know, so it's nice. You never know what can happen there, and last week Manny started off trolling, and then he wound up kind of adding a little bit to the conversation, and so it wasn't the worst thing. So anyways, yeah, would be interested in hearing questions from you guys. Jason says, heading to the Big E or too out of the way, too busy. What is the Big E, Jason? Not sure what you mean by that. But yeah, I'm gonna be heading up to the Boston area to see. Oh, the fair. No, I'm not going anywhere near the fair. When I pretty much what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna head up to Massachusetts tonight. I'll probably get to where my family is at. I'll probably get there by around midnight, maybe 1. Hey, Low Spec Gamer 101, nice to see you here on the live stream. Hope you're doing well. And then I'll be there tomorrow, Sunday, and then I'll head back Monday before my chemistry class. Low Spec Gamer, my channel is more or less about photography, adventure, and kind of the adventures that photography brings me on, and having fun with the camera really is what it boils down to. Hey Brian, good to see you here. I actually answered the question. I don't know if this is showing as one live stream or if it shows there being another live stream that I did before this, but like I got service cut off, and I wound up talking a little bit about the X-E2 then. But long story short is the X-E2 is pretty outstanding camera. I think it's going to be really nice. It's got most of the good stuff that's in the X-T2 and some new technology too that I think they're trying out before they release it, like the touchscreen and the Bluetooth, before they put that in like the next flagship. And if I had $900 to blow, yeah, I would go for it. And if I was starting out and I had like $1,500, so I had enough cushion to buy lens and or some other, you know, memory cards and other stuff, I would safely say that it's going to be a camera that will be very, very, very capable for most types of photography. And I go into more detail on that in the previous half of this, but I don't want to put everybody through a second rendition of my thoughts on the X-E3, unless you have specific questions, and then I'd be more than happy to answer that. Low Spec Gamer, thank you. I appreciate that. It is, well, some of the other photos that I've taken, a lot of them are photos that have inspired me. And right now, I am switching careers from photography. Well, I abandoned professional photography as a career over the summer and have kind of turned my course towards going back to school for nursing, because I want to be able to support myself and also be a photographer. And, you know, professional photography was getting a little bit not so fun. So now I'm in college, I'm studying, and so a lot of these images that are here on the wall, that's also for my own inspiration and for my own focus, you know, that when I'm studying, when I wake up in the morning and everything, I have things surrounding me that remind me this is why I'm going to class, this is why I'm doing this stuff, because it's all part of something bigger and better that ultimately ties in with my being able to spend more time outside with the camera and do more of the stuff that I love and the places that I love, which is mostly climbing and photography, and those two things go hand in hand. And if you check out my channel trailer, you can see I actually just made a new channel trailer today. I'm a little bit proud of it because it's taken me a long time to fully make a trailer that I'm actually satisfied with, and I figured, you know, what the heck, it's about time we put something like that together. So yeah, yeah, no fares for me, Jason. I generally speaking, when I go to visit the family, just, you know, I'll bring the camera and I'll be doing a lot of fun stuff with the camera, but I will be mostly just keeping it very casual indoors because I'm gone during most weeks and I don't see my daughter, who's 3 years old, and, you know, obviously I love my daughter. She's absolutely wonderful and I miss her a whole bunch. So, you know, the time that I have there is really precious, but at the same time I also want to use the time to, you know, shoot videos and shoot photos because she enjoys that part of things too, and, you know, getting to help me play with the cameras, and also it's, you know, something that I get to take back with me, because, you know, you really do miss a lot of time with the kids when you're gone. And, you know, the first 3.5 years of my daughter's life I spent almost every day with her, because I was working a lot from home and I could kind of go where I wanted, come and go as I please, and my wife was a flight attendant, so even when we were traveling, you know, we were always kind of very close. And so now that I kind of have to bite the bullet and go to school out of state, which having to go to school meaning that, you know, I chose to go back to school for nursing, and I chose to go to this specific college because I teach at this college, number one, so I can make some money and I have some connections, and also the amount that I'm saving because I'm living here with my dad. This is actually the room that I grew up in as a kid, or the house that I grew up in, like I was born in this house. So, you know, saving money and kind of having some connections at the university is allowing me to do this. So the trade-off is that, you know, I see my family on the weekends, and that's kind of tough, you know, that I don't love that part of things, but it's a good reminder when I have the pictures and, you know, the opportunity to create stuff. It's a good reminder of why I'm doing this in the first place. And I think it's super, super important for all of us when we're doing anything creative to always have that connection to why it is that why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's not just about making the sharpest picture from one corner to the next and being able to, you know, put it up on Reddit and spray about how awesome your cameras and I mean, that stuff is fun too, don't get me wrong, but for me anyways, there's definitely a therapeutic component to what I do with photos and video, and that's predominantly what I hope that this channel is able to communicate and to share. And I don't know where the heck the comments thing went over here, but I'm trying to pull up some of the comments. Oh, there we go. Oh, so there's not a button for that. Okay, so they just updated. Here's an interesting tip for anybody who does YouTube streaming. They don't have a specific button for comments, it looks like, anymore. It's just like you swipe down on the screen and it brings them back. Yeah, I don't know what Manny's on about tonight, but so far there's no interesting questions coming from Manny Rosenberg, our resident troll, that I feel like answering, so I'm going to just kind of pass those over for now. Brian Mercado says, by the way, followed your advice from before, got the Panasonic G85, enjoying it so far, just getting used to it with the autofocus, but it's been really good so far. Awesome. That's really cool, Manny. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian, not Manny. I'm glad you're enjoying the G85. There's another camera that, you know, honestly, it's kind of like if you're primarily interested in video, the G85 is kind of, in my mind, very equivalent with the X-E3. X-E3 being like that same, not flagship model, but has most of the same features and super valuable, good price range. you know, the video side of things, the Panasonic, and like the still side, if you're doing Fuji, the X-E3 looks to be one of those types of cameras that's really high value camera, really cool. I enjoyed it a lot when I was using it. So yeah, it's a baby GH5. That's exactly right. And budget wise, if you're shooting video, and again, one of these days, once I get out of school and I actually have a job properly, I think that I probably will get like a GH3 or something as like a B cam, and maybe if I can, you know, do more shooting on the side. Which, although to be fair, right now, I have plenty of yeah, the G85 has IBIS, the GH3 does not, but the G85 has IBIS, which is very good. It was noisy at first, and then they fixed it with a firmware update, and I believe, from what I've heard now, it's on par with the GH5. And the GH5, at the end of September, they're going to be updating the firmware for it, and I am really, really excited about that. I'm going to get a whole bunch of new stuff, but and I don't even remember exactly what that is. I probably honestly don't need it, if I'm being really, really candid. I think part of it is the 400 megabits per second at their 4K, you know, going to get a little bit more data, so bigger files, and I don't really need that. The HDR, I think that's HDR for video, which should be interesting too. Again, not something that I lay awake in bed at night thinking if only I had HDR capability when I shoot video, but it'll be a cool thing to play around, and I appreciate Panasonic and Fuji for giving us all of that good stuff via firmware. Brian says, I might just get an X-E3 rather than an X100F. Yeah, you know, I think they're kind of two different animals, and it depends on what it is that you want to shoot. For my mind, the big value in the X100F is that it has a lens on it, and I don't have to worry about changing lenses. Now, to me, interchangeable lenses is something that I want to minimize as much as possible, especially at a price point. The Fuji lenses, they're outstanding, but they're not cheap. I think that for a decent dollar amount, you can get a good, you know, some good quality for not too much money. So like comparing the Fuji lenses with the Zeiss lenses for Sony, which I believe to be a fair comparison with the experiments that I've seen, and also just the image quality out of the Fuji lenses. You know, the Fuji lenses are cheaper, more affordable, more economical than the Zeiss lenses for Sony, so that's why I would say, yeah, Fuji is cheaper. But at the same time, just for doing still photography, you can get a lot of, I mean, what I found doing climbing and landscape photography and adventure photography, which is what I've been doing with the X100F, is that if 35 millimeters is wide enough for you, which 35 millimeters is pretty nicely wide for most landscape stuff, and the only situation where I feel like I would miss the interchangeable lenses from a climbing photography standpoint, which again, climbing photography it's kind of a niche. Most of the people who watch this channel are not necessarily climbers, maybe hikers, backpackers, they spend time outside. But climbing is unique in that you are tied to a fixed position. You can't cross the street, take a few steps over there, say, hey, could you back up, move this way, come towards me. You don't have that flexibility because you're moving more or less in a two-dimensional space, and you don't have the three-dimensional space, you know, ability to kind of move there along, I think it's the Z-axis they would call it. If my terminology is correct, I'm not a geometrician or a mathematician or any kind of a at all for that matter, so forgive me if I'm a little off base there. But you know, that makes the 35 millimeter lens a little bit limiting, but limitations aren't bad, right? The question is what it is that you want to do. Photician. I'm trying to be a photician. Good evening, Mario. Yeah, there's definitely a trade-off there, and again, it depends on what you want to do, because the X100F, it has the built-in ND filter, which for me, I feel like not having to change lenses is a burden lifted. I embrace that limitation because I don't want to change lenses. I don't need too many different lenses. I would prefer to just have one, and especially at a time when, you know, the lenses, what I've decided to do is, there's still part of me that's like, you know, there's still part of me that is interested in having a variety of lenses, but I can do that by buying old lenses because I'm not afraid of manual focus. I can get great quality, great image quality out of old, like this old Fuji M42 mount lens that I have a speed booster on the way for my X Pro 2, or my X Pro 1. I'm sorry, I don't have an X Pro 2. The X Pro 1 that I got for 300 bucks. This lens was 30 bucks. The speed booster is 75, and I'll have a super, super awesome lens on a camera that is still more than capable. Let me see here. What was the question? Yeah, so Brian, basically you're comparing the built-in ND filter, leaf shutter, compact size, and the looks, which is important. The aesthetics matter, right, for the stuff that we do. And then the interchangeable capability and the touchscreen and the joystick, although the X100F has a joystick as well. So really it's the touchscreen and the interchangeable lenses that you gain on the X-E3. So yeah, it really depends on the style of shooting and what you want to do. It's just that when you have an interchangeable system, you have to buy lenses for them, and yeah, and the Bluetooth. Yes, good evening, Peter. Good to see you here. Yeah, and I was very impressed with the Bluetooth technology, what they showed in terms of like the auto dumping mode to be able to just put JPEGs onto your phone as you shoot them, or in pretty close succession. I don't know whether you had to do it all in one batch or whether it happens one by one just automatically. That wasn't clear in the video that I watched about it. And to be fair, I'm not planning on buying the X-E3 so anytime soon. Maybe I'll buy it used when like the X-E4 comes out and I have completed nursing school and I'm flush with cash and I can afford to buy something like that again. But then the X-E4 will have like IBIS, and then I'll be like, maybe I'll buy the one with IBIS. But it'll be cool at that point because I'll actually have a job and I'll be able to kind of indulge some of my gear acquisition syndrome. Or the X Pro 3. Yeah, it's funny because since I've tried the X Pro 1, I have found that I just love the ergonomics and the feel of that over the XT. And I've never shot the XT1, but like the X Pro 1 feels really nice. It's just a little bit bigger and beefier, and like it's small enough to be small, but it's not so small. It's just right. It fits just right in the hand, and for me, those ergonomics make such a big difference in the speed and the ease of deployment when you're shooting, so that you're not having to like always worry about changing settings. And the GH6, I can't even imagine what they're going to put when Panasonic goes, levels up their next camera. I haven't even heard any specs. I'd be curious if you guys know what they're going to put in that, but I mean, there's just so much meat on the bone with the GH5. I can't even wrap my head around it. But King Uzi, you asked a bit ago about getting just like one all-purpose lens, one versatile lens, and like an 18 to 300. Trying one versatile lens, like 18 to 300 millimeter, would be like a fixed lens camera. I see what you're saying. Okay, so basically get one zoom lens to rule them all instead of one camera to rule them all. And oddly enough, like everything that has happened for me on YouTube started about a year ago on this quest to get a one camera to shoot everything. And I have one camera to shoot everything. Here it sits. This is the GH5. Meet the one camera that does everything. And again, I know that there are some people who really want and need the super low light performance, which the GH5, it's not like a see in the dark camera, but I can tell you that when it comes to shooting bokeh and getting the very pleasing portraits out of this camera, you put some decent telephoto vintage glass on here and boy, it'll sing. The GH5 is no slouch in the stills department, and I love Fuji as much as anybody, but I know a lot of people want to have kind of put it in this category where it's like the Fuji does stills up here and the GH5 and the Micro Four Thirds, and kind of poo-poo the Micro Four Thirds. And I gotta tell you, like, I love Fuji, I love their image quality, but the GH5 is no slouch. I mean, you can get comparable results. Not the exact same. There are some differences in the processors and all of this stuff, but comparable results where you wouldn't be like, and I hope to demonstrate this on some level when I show you some of the images that I shot in the next part of my adventures in Canada with Martin. So you saw some of that in the X100F video. We did one climb up the Achilles Spire, and we also then repeated an old route a couple days later, an old climbing route that his dad established. And like the bumper intro outro footage, I guess on the outro footage, and also if you watch the trailer that I uploaded, okay? Not right now, but watch the trailer that I uploaded for the channel just today. And that's kind of a little teaser about the second part of the, and there's a still image like that I animated in the teaser or in the trailer for this channel, and that all 100% GH5. And I shot stills and video, kind of did full-on hybrid mode, one lens, the 12-35, which in answer to your question, King Yuzi, the 12-35 for me is an all-purpose lens. And on the GH5, which is burly, I mean, burly camera. When you think of like what you want out of a camera that you can take climbing, you can take that thing climbing and you can wedge it in and tie off and rappel off that thing. I mean, I wouldn't because it's a really expensive rappel anchor, but the GH5 is effing burly. And the 12-35 millimeter lens, under most circumstances, I really can't see needing a telephoto lens that goes that far beyond 70 millimeter equivalent. I mean, it's fun to have, but if I'm in a situation where I'm shooting based on something that would be fun to try, in that situation, I would be able to carry a few extra lenses and take my time and change them up. But if I'm doing something that's going to be like, okay, I'm going to tell a story, here's what I need to come out of this, then I'm either going to be bringing the X100F or the GH5 with the 12-35. The 24-70, it gives me just enough reach, but the size is super small. And when I'm, kind of running and gunning with the GH5, I don't ever feel like I really need to change lenses unless I'm shooting in super, super low light. And in that case, I have one of the little tiny Olympus primes. Yeah, nature photography is definitely something where the telephoto is 100% useful, and I'm 100% wrong if we're talking about nature photography. 24-70 is not what you need for nature photography, at least not for most of the shots where you want to be up there like seeing the glisten in the bear's eyeball. You're going to want a telephoto lens for that, but I really don't do nature photography as such. I like telephoto lenses for shooting, I like to think of it as though shooting portraits of mountains. I love mountains. I am a alpine-ophile, if there's a word for somebody who loves mountains. I love mountains. I think they're beautiful. I love pictures of mountains, hence, up there. I love being in the mountains. I love everything about the mountains. I love the geometry, the textures, and just everything. So for me, the 24-70 for the subjects that I'm usually photographing, Bigfoot, never seen Bigfoot, and would be happy to photograph Bigfoot, but there again, you probably would need a telephoto lens. But for what I'm shooting, 24-70 really does the trick for me as an all-purpose lens. However, one of the things that I found is that so much of the time that limitations are really, really good. And I know that this isn't, it may seem like a little bit of a cop-out to always be saying this because, you can look at anything as a limitation and just choose to embrace it as a creative limitation. But I can tell you one thing that I've noticed is that if I'm shooting video, I can kind of switch into stills mode and grab a couple of decent stills much more easily than if I'm predominantly focused on shooting stills and I want to grab a little video. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a lot easier. It depends on what my main deliverable is. So that's one of the reasons why the X100F review, that's why I did it the way that I did, is because I really wanted to just focus on taking stills. And if I have video capability available to me, a lot of times I'm going to be like, I'll get inundated with this OCD type of urge to do everything. And then as a result of that, I'll do neither thing particularly well. So I found a camera that does everything. It's just now I found out that I can't do everything. So having some specificity at the end of the day seems like it's a valid thing. And it only took me, a year and like 100 YouTube videos and like a couple $1,000 to figure that out. Drone for mountain photos. I have not done a lot of drone work myself, although I would love to. That's one thing that I would be way into, but yeah, I haven't done a whole bunch of that. One of the big challenges with drone work in climbing areas, and I say climbing areas which are usually mountains, but there might not be 100% overlap with your question, Peter. I have found that most climbing areas or mountainous areas where there are, exactly, yes, King Uzi nailed it. He says, I'm waiting for a silent drone, and that's the big thing, is that people get really squirrely when you start bringing a drone out, and like, especially in the outdoor community, whether it's hiking, backpacking, camping, climbing, any of that stuff, people start to feel like resentful if you're making a production out of their weekend trip to the crag or hike in the mountains. And so you have to be really judicious about that, and it turns into sort of a sideshow. Yeah, it does disturb the peace, and it's the same thing, like, you'll get people that come out there with their Bluetooth speakers and, playing their music, and they're out there at the crag, climbing and listening to reggae, and, their heart may be in the right place, but nobody really wants to get their, I don't know. I don't even know enough about the reggae culture. I know that reggae is really popular amongst climbers, like especially the younger gym climbers with the yoga pants and the prana pants and everything is like when Chris Sharma used to be, kind of at the top of the climbing scene. All of his climbing videos, they always had like this, the reggae background music that has become sort of a meme in like climbing culture. And in a gym, that's fine. When you go outside to the crag, it's totally obnoxious and irritating. Good evening, QAne. Yeah, so I'm actually in New York this week, and the closet is Massachusetts, which is 3 hours away. And I will be going to visit my family because I'm in school right now, so this is my old room in New York where I'm staying as I'm attending classes, and then on the weekends when I can, I go to the less aesthetic space that is surrounding my closet. So, yeah, so the drones in the mountains, that's part of what has kept me away from them a little bit, but it's certainly something I would love to be able to do, and I think that when they get a quieter drone out there, I think that it's going to become much more accessible, Yeah, reggae, well, that's funny. So I think the reggae that you're thinking of is probably, like, actual Jamaican reggae is, like, a very separate thing to what, like, a lot of the climbing gyms and, like, the climbers tend to play. To be fair, my very first artist that I listened to for years before I kind of graduated into anything else was Bob Marley. And so, yeah, I have a soft spot there for reggae, but I still don't love hearing reggae when I'm out at the crags. Not because it's reggae, but because I'm out at the crags and I'm climbing. I'm outside, like I just don't want to hear anything or even like interact with other people for the most part. When I'm outside, like climbing, like I just want to be kind of by myself so I can focus on what I'm doing. And, it's an ethical thing, it's like most people typically want to assume that people prefer smaller environmental footprint, including noise, and some people are just like, they come out and they're just like, oh yeah, well, like I like this music, I like drones, like I like making YouTube vlogs, and so they come out there with the selfie stick and the drone and the music and all that stuff, and it just turns into a whole whole thing. And I'm typically very much on the other end of that, where I tend to be very reticent. Yeah, headphones are handy. Although, to be fair, headphones do fall out sometimes when you're climbing, and then you have like one headphone stuck in your ear and the other one like dangling, and you're sitting there like, you know, holding on, and just, you know, your mellow has just been harshed, and now you have like, you know, headphones dangling, and it's just, yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, drone photography would be super interesting. Yeah, sports earphones could be helpful. I mean, frankly, when you're climbing and you're doing that type of activity, I am the most guilty when it comes to saying, hey, society, I don't want to be part of you while I'm shopping at the grocery store. I don't want to talk. I don't want to interact, except for a handful of people. Like at the deli that I go to, like the guys at the deli, they're my very good friends because they're in charge of, you know, my meat and my cheese. And like, these are important people in my life when I go to the store. Otherwise, I have my headphones in, I'm listening to a podcast, listening to music, trying to take in some leisure time, despite the fact that I'm out in public. And so I'm 100% guilty of that. But when it comes to climbing, as much as I love kind of being in my own space mentally with some headphones, I almost never, same thing with hiking, you know, whenever I'm outside, like you want to keep the headphones out of the ears, because you need to be able to hear what's going on, because that's important for safety and all that stuff. Rika, the hopeful volunteerist, wants to know what podcasts I listen to. Ooh, that's a loaded question. I listen to a variety of podcasts. I listen to the Photo Podcasting Network. They have a handful of mirrorless photography shows that I really enjoy. I am subscribed to the Northrop's photography podcast, Art of Photography, video podcasts. Although I hate video podcasts because you have to watch it. You can't, I mean, you can work around it to get to the audio. Let me think, what else do I have? And I can't look right now because I'm streaming on my phone. I enjoy hearing a variety of different political schools of thought. I like Glenn Beck's podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast. I do listen to Alex Jones sometimes because I find him very entertaining, and it's nice for me to listen to somebody that kind of gives me because I follow different people that are of different political persuasions on different channels. So most of my Twitter feed is very left-leaning, and so I kind of balance that out by listening to Alex Jones. And so what I do is I feel like if I can disagree enough with these people over here and disagree enough with these people over here, that gives me some sense of like, okay, here's where I am. And yeah, Alex Jones is like, I'm not saying that they should, do any harm to them, but like, you got to go to these people and shake their hand and tell them, I'll do whatever is necessary. Do you understand? Like all this nudge, nudge, wink, wink stuff. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. But he's an entertaining character, I think. In terms of political podcasts that I feel like that actually make sense to me, where I'm like, yeah, this guy's got some good ideas. Yeah, exactly. Need a bit of crazy on both sides to equalize, and it rhymes. QAnon, you're leaving. Bummer, dude. I'm sorry. I'm glad you were able to check in. See you next week, I hope. Yeah, a little crazy on both sides to equalize. I think Glenn Beck has a lot of pretty close, he has a lot of things that I'm interested in, or at least a lot of his viewpoints, although I still find him a little bit glib on some issues but he seems to be the most, interested in centrism, like actually saying, okay, like what do people really want and need, and not trying to pander to like kind of the outskirts of the center, but rather being in the center and saying, no, let's just do what works. So I tend to like that about him. Joe Rogan, a lot of his podcasts are absolute and utter schlock, just total nonsense, but I have encountered some really interesting people on there, like and Jordan Peterson is somebody who I understand there's people hate on him for political reasons. He's like a professor, very educated, very scientific mind, and he has some unpopular opinions about transgender issues. but I find his look at kind of the way our culture is going and the impact of nihilism and the fact that so many people just don't believe in anything nowadays to be very, very right on the money in a lot of ways. And I think that, you know, Rogan has some really interesting stuff. I like, he's hit or miss, but I will give him the opportunity to do either. And sometimes sometimes he's kind of funny. He doesn't annoy me. He's got interesting guests, like you say. Let's see, the Jocko podcast. If there's one podcast I would say that is incredibly useful to me, it is the Jocko podcast, Jocko, Jocko podcast. Jocko Willink is a retired, and he's been on the Joe Rogan podcast, as well as the Tim Ferriss show, which is another one that I listen to, although I listen to Tim Ferriss a lot less because he's kind of run his course. And the fact that he thinks that he like kind of had it rough growing up in Long Island with like parents that were, what I know about Long Island, and nothing against Long Island or people who come from Long Island, but like people from Long Island think that they're middle class a lot of times and that they kind of, working class, very blue collar. And it's like, dude, like your mom was a real estate agent and your dad was like, did something in the medical field, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, dude, I can't take you seriously anymore. So I kind of fell off of Tim Ferriss a little bit, but to be fair, he has some really great guests and some great insights. I just don't religiously listen to his podcasts anymore. And so on the Tim Ferriss show, I found Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL, the commander of the task unit Bruiser in Ramadi. So he was very highly, I don't know whether he was personally decorated or what his deal is, but really it's a podcast about leadership and trying to take what he has learned from like 20 years in special forces and special teams on the Navy SEALs, and kind of, it's definitely, sometimes it's a little bit heavy on the oorah, the military side of things, which for me, I find these types of podcasts really interesting. I mean, I have family that's in the military. I probably would have gone into the military at one point about a decade ago if I didn't have type 1 diabetes. And like after 9/11, they were, the recruiters were calling, and I was just out of high school, and they were like, "Hey, son, you want to join the Marines?" I was like, "Sure." "Do you take type 1 diabetics?" And they're just kind of this awkward pause. "Do you know any friends who might want to join the Marines?" And I was like, But the Jocko podcast, even though it's based a lot in military stuff, it's not political, which is one of the things I really find interesting about it, is that like I have no idea I have a rough idea. I could guess what his political leanings are on some level, but it's very it's just like, it's completely politically ambivalent, the show. It's really all about leadership in extreme situations and discipline, and his whole thing is freedom through discipline, which I have to tell you, like, it sounds, and I think most platitudes or mantras or whatever, they are a little bit thin, where it's just a thing that people say. But if you actually do that thing, it can change your life. And I have to say that his whole, like, no excuses, just, like, do the hard work approach to everything has been a huge asset to me since I've been back in school. So I'm 35, I have a kid, my family is 3 hours away from me. I have to go drive 3 hours now to see them after this podcast is done. I'll probably get there around 2 or 3 a.m. And then I have like a day and a half while I have to do homework out there. And then I have to drive back right in time for, a chemistry quiz. And like I'm constantly studying, working, doing all of this stuff. And, it's not easy. And part of the thing is, like, I'm not a sciences guy. I majored in philosophy and English when I went to college because I always believed that I'm not good at math. I can't do this. I can't do that. This is the way my brain works. I shouldn't go anywhere near sciences. And now I'm at a point where 10, 12 years later, I'm like, no, I need to bite the bullet and I need to just work hard for the first time in my life. Like, I have never approached something that was not either photography or some sort of climbing or physical challenge, athletic challenge, where it would require me to work hard, because I always felt like I just want to not work hard in any of those academic things so that I can go outside and climb hard or work on my photography, which is kind of connected to or part of climbing hard, like in going to these places. And so it was a completely new experience where I felt way out of my element. And I failed chemistry in high school. I never, I barely made it through just basic algebra, like what I needed to get a basic diploma. Didn't get like any of the, there's like the AP classes that are college credit, and then there's like the remedial classes, and then there's like normal classes. Like I failed normal chemistry and did some like version of earth science to get a diploma, and like, so that put me in a situation where, 35 years later, I'm like older and I have all these other, or at 35 years old, I feel so much more pressure and I feel so much less able to compete, but I'm going and doing that. And what I have found is that, if you just work, you just, whatever it is that you want to get better at, you do that thing, and you don't worry about, I'm not good enough, I'm not, I can't do this, blah, blah, blah. You do more of it. You do more of it. You just don't listen to those voices. You don't make excuses. Freedom through discipline. And it's like, I'm taking this challenge on now so that I can have a job that 2-3 years down the road is going to provide me with the freedom so that I can do photography like as a largely full-time occupation, but I can do it on my terms. And I don't have to financially, it will occupy me, it's my occupation, right? But it doesn't have to be my source of income because I have a career for that, but it's a career that I had to work through some significant obstacles for me personally in the way that I learn and the way that my brain works, to get to that point. But it's just doing that thing that is hard, and just doing it over and over and over. It's funny in some ways because it's so simple, and like I never realized that it was that simple, and that I could actually be good at something if I just had to be, if I had to try hard over a consistent period. And so it's funny, like I also am teaching classes, and so I always tell my students that are like, I'm like, okay, we have an assignment that's going to be due, 2 weeks from now, and they're all like, I look at them and I see myself 12, 13 years ago, and they're all like, oh my God, I got this, they're checking the phone, I got to do this, and I'm just like, guys, I know it sucks, trust me, because I have homework that I'm going to go home after this class that I have to do for the classes that I'm taking. It sucks when you're doing it the first time through, but if you do it right, you most likely will not have to come back and do it a second time, right? But if you don't do it right, then that is, it sucks a lot more the second time around. So, that's what I've gotten out of the Jocko podcast. And, that's, it's important, King Yuzi, you're right. You want to know your strengths and weaknesses, totally. But I bet that I'm not going to give you life advice about learning to sing. I'm going to leave that one alone. But I know that for me, if I really, because to be fair, like if I put in a semester even of work and legitimately studied my face off and like really put in 100% effort where I could say I am putting in, this is my priority, and it is my priority. That's why I've been uploading once a week and I've been kind of falling behind. It's because like my priority is study and my family. That's like number one kind of tied priority because I'm studying for my family, but I also want to see my family, so there's, and be there for them. And of course my wife just had surgery for cancer last week, so I had to do work, kind of miss some classes and whatever, and I think I talked about that a little bit last week. She's doing much better now, and it looks like everything is good. But if I put in the effort to something and I put in all this semester, made this my priority, and I still was not, had nothing to show for it, then maybe I would say, okay, I can't do this. This is something that, but you never really know until you put in 100% effort. And to be fair, not everything is worth 100% effort either. I could put 100% effort into a lot of different things and probably experience good results, no matter where I do that. But, and thank you, Rika. Thank you for those good wishes. But yeah, and King Yuzi, you make a good point there too by saying that if you know what your weaknesses are, you know what you need to work on. And that's super, super important thing. Actually, and I'll go back to the podcast here in a second. I had a question from Peter. Ken actually asked me a relevant question. Not that I dislike irrelevant questions. Peter said, I like the welcome trailer. How did you do that Ken Burns type effect at 27 seconds in where the foreground moves at separate speeds? Peter, I'm guessing you are talking about the still image that I animated. That black and white shot, if that's at the place that I'm thinking of. I did that with a plugin for Final Cut Pro X, which is really the only thing that that and the warp stabilizer. I have to say the warp stabilizer on After Effects is really bitchin'. And the stabilization on Final Cut Pro X is kind of like, not super crazy about that. But that's a still image, and basically what you do, there's a plugin for it where, I mean, it's basically the same process. It just does it right in the window module display. It's all within Final Cut Pro X, but you can, it is done manually, but it's a plugin that allows you to do manual alterations where you separate it out, and basically, like, Final Cut Pro X is capable of some really, really advanced, powerful stuff. Like, most of the things that one would do with After Effects can be done in Final Cut Pro X if you have the right plugins that enable you to then go into those menus in the plugin and do the manual work, which is exactly what I did. So you do cutout, you have to like trace out the whole outline of the cutout, and then you animate it, and you do, you do you can do different things. You can bring it forwards, backwards, side to side, and all that stuff. But the plugin is called Propan, and it's super cool. I use it all the time, and you don't have to do the cutout and like animate different parts separately. You can just use it to do Ken Burns, but with a more straightforward and more with more control over all the different things. Right. So on Adobe, King Yuzi says you have to cut them out separately in Photoshop and then import both photos into Premiere, and you're doing the same thing on Final Cut Pro X, but you're just doing it all within the browser, and it's much more user-friendly the way that you do it, because you're just clicking around and everything is very straightforward, whereas in the Adobe, at least in my opinion, I think it's way easier doing that than in After Effects, because I have done that in After Effects, not recently, because I found this plugin. I haven't done it recently, and I don't have a subscription to After Effects in the Creative Cloud currently, although Warp Stabilizer is super nice. But that's pretty much the only thing. But it's so much of a pain having to kind of round trip stuff when you're in Final Cut Pro X to kind of use an Adobe product for part of that is not super straightforward. So most of the time I just let it go, yeah, so let's see. Life hacks here. What life hacks are we talking about? Rika. Filmora. I don't know what Filmora is. So I can't tell you. Sorry. You can tell me when you find out. But as with most of those types of like documentary style still photo animation tools or effects, it's very easy to like do it too much. Like you have to use just a little bit, and if you use too much or you overdo it, then it like you can see the image coming apart, or you can see the weaknesses, you can see what's been done, and it just looks kind of doesn't look good. But if you do it really carefully, it's pretty exciting, and I love that, because that's one of the nice things is a lot of times, especially with the photography channel, if I want to, I can go out and shoot a day of still photos, and then I can come back and animate those and put those into a video and stuff like that. I have not heard of Filmora, and I have certainly not used it, unfortunately. I haven't really used much in terms of video editing, with the exception of iMovie, both on the computer and on my phone, and I have used Premiere a tiny bit, enough to know that I don't like it. and I have used After Effects also enough to know that I want to like it, but I still don't like it. And again, that's just me personally. Oh, podcasts. Since Manny is just spraying his nonsense around here, a few more podcasts that might be useful to you. Yeah, I would. Okay, I'm sorry. The question before I get to podcast, Rika, if you're looking for the software, it is a plugin. Pixel Film Studios. Pixel Film Studios is the company that makes this, and they make a whole pile of plugins that are really good, really advanced stuff. Basically, with their plugins, you can add the functionality to Final Cut Pro X in just about everything that I would need or use it for. And I haven't looked back there recently to see if they have like some kind of advanced stabilizing plugin that might, supplant the need for warp stabilizer in After Effects, but there's a ton of stuff that you can do with their plugins. Pixel Film Studios. I have no affiliation with them, no whatever. I just get their emails all the time, and I bought a handful of plugins, and I find them very useful. Also, if you like my subtitles and my intro subtitles and the glitching and all the different subtitles, that's where I get them. They're all plugins for Final Cut Pro X, which you can manually do a whole bunch of stuff with them from that point. But even presets, they're really easy to use and really useful. Podcasts, though, the Hey Indie Filmmakers podcast is really, really good. Well, once I have more subs and once the channel is a little bit bigger, then I might be able to get some affiliate deals. But I'm still building that that phase of what I'm doing. The Hey Indie Filmmakers podcast with Griffin Hammond is awesome, super good. Peter, have a good evening, and thank you for stopping by and for being part of the community here. The Hey Indie Filmmakers podcast, if you're interested more in video, is super useful. I heard somebody say the TWIP podcast, This Week in Photography. I have not watched that one a whole bunch personally, but Ted Forbes, Art of Photography, and the Northrops podcast, and the PPN, the Photo Podcasting Network, they have some really, really good stuff. And the PPN is all about mirrorless photography, photographers. They have different shows that they put out every month. One of them is like an inspiration show where they just talk about the creative process and they don't talk about gear at all. Then they have a Q&A show where listeners submit questions, and they basically anything that you want to know about. And the one guy is a street portrait photographer, the other guy is a bird photographer, so very wildly different styles, and they bring some really cool stuff. The one guy shoots Olympus, the other guy shoots Fuji and Leica. So they have a lot of really good perspectives, and they've both been around the business for a long time, and so they have more than just like, way more than pixel peeping. They have really, really good, inspiring, relatable content about, which frankly, I'm not tooting my own horn, but they inspire me with what I put into my videos and what I talk about and the way that I approach things. A lot of it is, inspiration that I've gotten from shows like the Photo Podcast Network on iTunes. Again, no affiliation there. I just like their stuff. I'm trying to think what else I have that I listen to. Those are the majority of the podcasts. There's some alternative ancient history podcasts like Earth Ancients that I listen to, where they talk about all kinds of silly stuff and sort of the Graham Hancock and pyramid theories and ancient civilizations, which I find that stuff really, really interesting. I like those types of shows as well. There's also, what's the mysteries? There's one called Mysteries Abound, which is okay. I listen to that podcast too, again, about kind of different mysterious topics, strangely enough. And let's see, what else? There's the one, Astonishing Legends. That's what it is. Astonishing Legends podcast. It's a little bit fluffy. You won't get any real hard-hitting stuff there, but they take stuff like all genres of mystery and, whether it's hauntings or, Flat Earth. Yeah, they don't really do much with the flat Earth. I have watched my share of flat Earth videos, and I think they're interesting, but I think that they are misguided. I mean, like, they ask interesting questions, right? Like, there are some things it's like, hey, well, why can you, see this far out, or why can you see Toronto from, or whatever the city is that's across the Lake Michigan or whatever from the Chicago skyline? Curvature of the Earth should put it at such a level where you can't see this from here. I think they ask some interesting questions, but, hardcore history. Hardcore history, is that Carlin, Dan Carlin, I think. I don't watch or listen to that one, but I've heard about it. Yeah, I haven't heard about that one too much. Oh, the history podcast, and I bet you that you listen to this one, Rika. It's what the hell's the guy's name? He has been putting out episodes recently. He's been on kind of a dry spell. Prof CJ. You might know the podcast I'm talking about, and it's super irritating because it's like I can't look it up on my phone. It's right there without quitting the live stream. But it's that's gonna drive me nuts. Prof CJ, he's like talking about all kinds of history stuff, and he's very much like libertarian. Dangerous History podcast, I think, right? Is that the one? Is that the one you were just talking about and I totally missed it? Hardcore History. Okay, yeah, Hardcore History is Carlin. The Dangerous History podcast, DHP, with that's on iTunes. I don't know if he's on YouTube as well. If he makes videos, I've seen him on some podcast. I've seen him on some YouTube. Like if you type in Prof CJ, he's on there. He's on. You can find videos of him on YouTube, but he's not. I don't think he has his own YouTube channel. So yeah, well, not everybody likes Apple, but I'm a fan. I don't like that I like Apple, but I like Apple and I use Apple. So there you go. And there's, let's see, trying to think what else. There's one, and the funny thing is, a lot of these podcasts, like I follow, and there's one about Amelia Earhart that's really good. It's like an Amelia Earhart. Yeah, bumped up the lighting game. Good evening, FemGeek. Good to see you here. Yeah, I put into practice some of the stuff that we were talking about. I got an extra LED lamp, and so far so good. I'm not unhappy with it. I'm just babbling on about podcasts that I listen to. Let's see, what else? There's one about the Native American history and legends podcast. That's like a couple of guys from Buffalo, and but it's a really interesting podcast where they just talk about Native American history and legends, and very, very interesting stuff on there as well. Yeah, it's really good. Revisionist history. I've listened to some stuff with Malcolm Gladwell a little bit. I've listened to his interview on the Tim Ferriss show, but I haven't listened to that podcast a great deal. Yeah, and that's true. There's so many different podcasts you can listen to. You really do have to prioritize, based on your time. And I barely have time to listen to podcasts now, because the only time I can do that is driving to and from class. And pretty much when I'm here, all I'm doing is, schoolwork, eating, sleeping. I haven't even started working out again because I moved to New York for school, so I haven't gotten a gym here yet, and the gym at our school is not what I'm looking for in a gym. So I need to get a gym, but I also need to fit that into the schedule, and right now I have literally no downtime. Almost literally no downtime. I could probably make downtime if I didn't go to see my family on the weekends. That would be some downtime, but I want to see my family. I haven't seen them for a minute. and I want to test out my new old $30 lens, Fuji 135 3.5. So Tiff, this is basically a very similar lens to your Super Tac lens. It's an M42 lens, but it's a Fuji lens. And I heard really good things about it when I Googled it, and I bought it. I put it on the camera. I just did a couple of very rudimentary test shots with this that I have not shown anybody. These are completely, this is going to be like cutting edge after the weekend, or maybe during the weekend when I have some stuff to actually show for this lens. But the tests that I did, like super pixel peeping. So I shot the windscreen on my microphone, and like you could see, and from like, I don't know, like 30 feet away, you could see individual fibers of the windscreen, plus through that you could differentiate between the windscreen and then like the wire mesh on the microphone behind that. Like, it was insane. This is all like manual focus, handheld, no, definitely with a little bit of editing and kind of tuning it up, because one of the things I've found is that the it's a the lens type is a Fuji 135 millimeter f3.5. I got $30 from KEH.com, and these lenses are supposed to, it's M42 mount, screw mount, very similar to the Pentax lens, same basic lens, only just Fuji. And when I Googled it, it said that it was super sharp and it was like a gem for $30. So I went ahead and got it, because I was originally trying to get the Super Tac version of that, but I got the Fuji instead, and super sharp, really nice, just fantastic. The one thing that I found with some of these older lenses is that the resolving power, and I don't know the science behind this, I'm just kind of stumbling through my thought process, like the resolving power is not up to where the sensor is, and so you have to kind of add some sharpening more so than I do with like my X100F, for example. With the X100F, I add maybe, like, because when I shoot it raw, I have like minimum sharpening, minimum, like all the camera options turn all the way down. But with with these older lenses, with the X100F, I do maybe like between 15 and 25 sharpening if need be. Sometimes I don't, depending on the situation, but like I've never done more than like 20, 25 sharpening on the Lightroom slider. But with these older lenses, I'll do like 35 to like 60 without it looking over sharpened. And I'm not sure exactly the science of how that all works, but I'm assuming that the glass is not quite up to the resolving power of the sensor. That may or may not be right. Again, I am not a scientist. I do not study these things, but I'm just reporting what I've observed, and that is that I can add a lot more sharpening in, and the point of diminishing return using an old lens with the sharpening is much further than it is otherwise. Daniel says, I'm addicted to the clarity slider. I hear ya. Clarity and dehaze are two things that I enjoy, but one thing that I found that's really useful to make sure you don't overdo it, which if you go back to scroll all the way back to my beginning, I just printed out a couple of photo books from Zeno. It's ZNO. It's a publishing company that printing my Instagram timeline, and I'm doing it in little books here and there. And it's like 100-page books or whatever, so I have 20-something books that I can print, and I'm not printing them all at once. I'm doing like one a month for $10, just so I can gradually have all of my photos on my Instagram timeline. I can have them as a real tangible book, right? Probably in the next year. And so the thing that I have found looking back through my Instagram feed is that, like, I mean, it's so humiliating. I'm looking at these pictures, I'm like, oh man, I overdid the HDR stuff, the clarity so bad, and I just ruined photos. And at the time I was like, oh, this looks so good. I should, add a little more clarity. Like all real photographers, like the pictures that I was seeing, I was like, oh yeah, HDR looks so good. And then I would just completely overdo it, and then it would look terrible. So one of the things that I found though in the editing process is that like when I am in close on the image and it's blown up, I feel like it's really easy to overdo when you're looking that large, and then when you see them in a thumbnail and it's way more compressed, you can see a lot more. And so what I will usually do is try to zoom way out and make it so it's like kind of a thumbnail size image, and then look at it and see, if I first glance, does this look like I'm trying too hard? And that's the thing, is like you got to find a good balance. But that's one way for me to find, because a lot of times when I'm looking at it and it's like full size, or not 100%, like not pixel peeping zoomed in, but like just, you know, full display fit into the window, it looks really good. And I can't see the kind of areas where it looks a little sloppy or messy. But when I zoom it out to like thumbnail size, closer to what it might look like on my phone, because that's what would always happen. And I would, you know, airdrop the stuff over to my phone, and I'd be like, oh man, this looks so good on my computer. Why does it look like shitty HDR subreddit on my camera roll? And it's because like I wasn't seeing stuff when they were big. It was like you had to shrink it down. And it's the same thing like with YouTube thumbnails. You know, I've started doing that too, is like shrinking it way down and saying, okay, it's nice that this thing reads for me when I'm, you know, editing the thumbnail for my video and it's in full resolution, but what about when it's the size of a postage stamp, the way most people are going to actually see it on YouTube? Does it still read as well? And then kind of going with that. So that's something that I've been trying to do, kind of a practical application for that. So anyways, I am getting close to signing off for this week. One of the things that I wanted to mention to you guys, and I talked to you a little bit about this last week, I'm thinking in the coming weeks I would like to start doing photo challenges, projects, kind of similar in some ways to what Ted Forbes does on the art of photography, but maybe not quite as, you know, assignment-y, or not necessarily from a standpoint of instruction, but more from a standpoint of, hey, we're all here because, you know, we like a no-frills, no-nonsense approach. I know some of you are already doing those photo challenges, but I think it would be cool to do something that's maybe a little bit more casual, maybe something where we could, you know, pick a challenge like maybe every 2 weeks or every month or something like that, put a hashtag for it, and then be able to kind of keep tabs on our work on Instagram, see what people are, you know, getting into, see the work that we like, see the stuff that we, you know, can take a little something from. Because one of the things that I have found, especially with the last video that I uploaded, and of course I shot that about a month ago when I was in Canada, but creative limitation, as I say all the time, sometimes, you know, we fight the limitation because we want to have new gear, fancy stuff, you know, myself as much as or more than anyone. But ultimately, when we have to make do with less, we find that that has a positive impact on what we're able to create, because it eliminates distraction and confusion and allows us to really just focus on, you know, a smaller number of variables at one point, which ultimately improves our work. And so I'd like to start making videos that are in conjunction with improving photography, you know, and some of that being challenges, and some of that being more just kind of small tips, down to earth stuff, like experiences, like things that I'm doing to improve my photography. I mean, I have way less time to do anything now, but I found that, you know, buying photo books on eBay is like a really nice thing, because you can get a book for like $5, a used book that's beautiful, and everybody's going away from books, libraries and charities, everybody's selling their books. And you can get a book and like really improve your photography, I think, by just spending more time immersed in good photography. And I think it's important to expose yourself, and to expose yourself. Let me complete that thought before Manny jumps in here and finishes it for me. You know, to expose yourself to the finished work, which is printed photographs, because printed photographs are different than digital photographs. I think it's awesome that we can collect and curate so much of our lives digitally. But I think that if we don't take it that extra step and put that further effort into it to really make it tangible, make it real, something that we can interact with, something that we can trip over or cut ourselves with, I think we're missing a big part of the joy and the fun that is photography. And one of the things, and I left them in the other room, and I'm not going to... Actually, you know what? I have a couple of books here that I can show you that I got off of eBay. I was going to run and grab... there's a service called Free Prints, Free Photo Prints, or something like that. They have an app, and you know, it's like every month, it comes out to $10 shipping, so it's definitely not free. But you can get, they give you like up to 80 prints. And so what I've been doing is like every few months, I'll just go through my camera roll, and I will pick out my favorite photographs, and I'll get them printed. And some of them are photos that are hanging on the wall. I got some Instax photos there, and some of these ones here directly behind me are shots that I took myself. And you know, they're not huge, big, beautiful prints. I mean, I have a couple of those too, and a couple of the GH5 prints over there. You know, I like those, but I don't have the money or the space, frankly, to have those things. And so there are always little ways that we can put effort into bringing our photography out of just this theoretical abstraction where they sit and nothing happens with them and nobody gets... It's like, I have so many images that I'm so proud of, that I love, that nobody gets to enjoy because, like, yeah, I have the personal satisfaction of knowing that they're on my hard drives. Like, yay, that's awesome. But, like, I'm trying to find it. I think I have it on this wall here. There's one image in particular... I was out it was almost 6 years ago well, not quite to the day, it was my birthday. It was September 11th is my birthday, just passed. Purposely don't tell people that because, oh, happy birthday, right? Like, I'm not a big birthday guy, but I was in Zion National Park on my birthday, and we were watching a thunderstorm, and I know that I printed that bloody photo. Oh, you know what? It is, it's in my collection of photos. Okay, I gotta run to the other room and get it. Just hang on a second. Couple of things here. Sweet, nobody left. That's awesome. I feel very loved and respected right now. Yeah, it's a little bit awkward. Well, thank you. I appreciate the birthday stuff, and let's see, wait a minute. Thank you. Oh, fellow Virgo. Nice. Oh, that explains a lot. That's why we're always like hanging out and having like using the same lenses and talking about the same stuff on Twitter. That's killer. So yeah, these are like the bundle of free prints that I got. Again, it's silly that they call them free prints because they're definitely not free when you factor in the shipping. But you know, I want to have like just shit piles of these things. Like I want to have lots of photos. That's something that I want to surround myself with. Let's see, what do we got here? See? Might remember this. Fishing with my daughter. I'm pretty sure that they do. I don't know if they ship worldwide. I can't say that with certainty, but they're pretty big. They're not like a fly-by-night thing. See, look at this. Isn't she beautiful? That's my baby. And yeah, so I'm fairly certain that they ship worldwide. Where is that bloody photo? Because I specifically got it printed because I was like, this photo has been, like, I've wanted to get this thing printed for the longest time, and I have to get like a full-on sized version of this printed, and I'm going to find it. Since I got up and went to the other room for it, it's gonna happen. I promise you. And it might have been in the other pile and I just overlooked it. But anyways, it is a photograph of a lightning strike that we were watching a thunderstorm blow in on my birthday. It was myself and my wife and a couple of our friends, and here it is, I found it. And this was like back in 2012. I was in the middle of my 365-day climbing challenge that I made the documentary about and that I've talked about a whole bunch here. And after a day of climbing, it was like, okay, what do we want to do? Let's go drive up the mesa. And we were like, every day it was just like outside getting after it and shooting. And so I had my Nikon D5100 out there, and we're watching this thunderstorm start to blow in over Mount Kinasawa, which is this, okay? And so we're sitting across from there, and I'm sitting like right here. I mean, like this lightning strike, and there was one that I took after this. And I mean, it was just amazing. I'm probably more proud of this picture than just about anything else that I've ever taken, because I literally almost died getting this photo because it was blowing in so fast. Everybody else was like piling into the Jeep because it was all like dirt roads, and we wanted to get out of there and not get stuck in the rain, because if you get stuck in the rain on those roads, they just turn to mud, because like they have county roads and state roads that are completely mud when it starts raining. And so there was one after that, which I didn't get a print of that one. I did that in black and white, but it was like the first one was, I don't know how far away this thing was. I mean, you can see this is probably like a half a mile away or so, and then like 30-40 seconds later there was one that was like maybe 500 yards away. Like it was close enough that you could see it splash when it hit the ground, and it was just like I had to get that shot though, and grabbed the camera, jumped in the back of the Jeep, and off we went, and managed to get that shot. But photos like that, that are sitting on my hard drive, they will get, if I post it on Instagram, and I think I post this every now and then just because like I want to have it around, I want to look at it, and I thought I had this hanging on my wall, and I'm going to put it on my wall. But anyways, yeah, like photos like this don't really mean a whole lot unless you do something with them and you make it so it's like, hey, this is a thing, this is a real thing, this happened, I'm going to do that. And Peter, thank you, good to see you back here. Yeah, like I need to put in the effort to get this printed properly and have something nice done with it, because this is really a spectacular photo. The other thing too, okay, so Ansel Adams, anybody heard him? He's a guy, I heard he was like a photographer. Follow him on Instagram. These books are on eBay for like $4. Like, these are thick books. This is a lot of meat on the bone. $4. It's like so much. There's so much in here. Like, I mean, granted, I could be just like repurposing my gear acquisition syndrome into other stuff acquisition syndrome, which sounds accurate. And I'm not going to buy any more books for a while, I promise. I'm like trying to do better about that. But at the same time, I also got some books here. Let me show you this. So these are like a Time Life. Yeah, it is much, much cheaper. It's like the people that, quit heroin and then they get addicted to cigarettes, or like they quit cigarettes and they get addicted to diet soda or something, right? That's kind of what I'm doing here. But I got a set of Time Life books here, which are like, I don't know, like $8 or something. And there's the print. It's all about the process of printing and developing film. Photojournalism, that's all focused on photojournalism, photographers, and photography as a tool. It's like a whole series of, I guess today this would be like a website. This is the equivalent of a website. It's like a really awesome photography website. Thanks, Time Life. And for $9, I have this. And so every morning when I get up, you know, if we're going to do the Tim Ferriss thing, tell me about your morning routine. I want to tease out some actionable details that bring value to the community. I hate when people say bring value. That's the most irritating thing. And not to like pick on anybody in particular, but it just irritates when somebody's like, yeah, I have some real valuable content. It's like, well, maybe it's not valuable, you know? It's like, for somebody, this is really valuable. For somebody, this is worthless. So who am I to tell you if it's valuable? But I think it's entertaining, and that's all I'm really focused on. And if you find it valuable, great, but that's for you to decide. That's not for me to tell you. So I can never promise to bring anybody anything of value. That's for you to determine, and, you know, for me to find out. But anyways, ooh, look, there is a camera buyer's guide. I didn't even notice this. This is a camera buyer's guide from 1970. And let's see. All right, well, I'm not going to go through all the different things in here. Look, they got some sweet Pentax cameras. Like, this is awesome, right? I think I have that one. Because I got one of those with one of the lenses. Very similar to that. It's a Spotmatic camera, but I'm still waiting for the battery. But it's like, it's an awesome process of discovery. And so every morning when I wake up, I have a cup of coffee, because I don't have a lot of time in my day to spend reading, unfortunately, but I want to start my day out by just kind of relaxing and ramping into my day with something that is inspiring. So when I get up, first thing I do while I have my coffee, I sit down and just grab one of these books, and I'll spend like 10, 15, 20 minutes reading it, having my coffee, just before I do anything else, before I'm checking emails, before I'm, you know, working on schoolwork, which is primarily what I'm doing, or, you know, kind of teasing up my post for Instagram or what have you. Like, I'll grab a book and just do a little bit of reading and just kind of be non-digital for a while. Yeah, it is definitely better than reading a newspaper. There's something very nostalgic about photography, and specifically film photography. I mean, even the act of having a camera and taking pictures with a camera is in itself, even new digital cameras, it's somewhat nostalgic. It's a little bit old-fashioned, you know, and I appreciate that. I love it. And at the rate at which technology is moving today, which that could be a whole nother conversation, and for some people it certainly is, you know, I think that technology is moving so rapidly that the stuff that we're doing today in 10 years is going to be like rotary telephones and Morse code practically. I honestly don't think it's super healthy for us to, and nobody really well, I shouldn't say nobody, but like, you know, in the public sphere, you don't really hear a lot of discussion about, hey, too much of a good thing, like maybe we should, you know, it's good the technology is moving forward, but should we intentionally move it much more slowly forward? Because what happens, like when you, like as a person, when you hit a growth spurt, AJ online asks, what's a rotary telephone? I'm assuming you're not joking, but a rotary telephone is like where you have to dial somebody's number on a phone. I actually like a landline, but it's a type of landline that was before pushing buttons, and yeah, old school. That's and I have one downstairs. We don't have a landline here anymore at my dad's place. Well, he has a flip phone, it's like a non-digital equivalent of a flip phone. It's like the flip phone beyond flip phones. But, you know, it's like when a person gets a disease, like they have, I've heard of Osgood-Schlatters disease. It's like basically when your bones are growing faster than your ligaments, and you just get stretched and are in pain all the time. And it's, you know, when a lot of like adolescents wind up getting this, you know, when they hit growth spurts. And I think socially, like we've had technology change so much, so fast, that it's just completely, it's like pulled the rug out from under us, where we haven't actually learned to adapt, and we haven't learned to well, to kind of come to an equilibrium with the technology that we have before moving to the next thing. And that's part of the reason, like with social media and all these platforms. And like photography, it's like the way I look at it is technology is this swirling storm, this maelstrom of just, you know, there's some good stuff out there, you know, in the technology. There's stuff that I use and that I enjoy, but photography is like that shelter from the storm where I can duck out of the high winds and feel a little bit of peace. Because it's one thing that, you know, there's different solutions and different ways that people are making photographs today, but at the end of the day, most of it still boils down to the same core processes of like composition, lighting, you know, your eye, your creative vision, a passion for something that you're willing to go and see and point your camera at and take the time to tell a story with. Like, it's something that is very, you know, for me, it's like a piece of the past that is worth hanging on to. And, you know, ultimately it's a losing battle and we're all going to die and it's not going to work. And I expect our society to completely collapse, honestly, within the next 2.5 to 5 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I don't have, you know, I don't talk about political stuff, but I just think that it's, you know, we're not going in a good direction with technology. And so Tiff says, for tech it's fascinating, for some, for others it's scary, and then there are those that it makes them even more lazy and less innovative and opposite of what it's supposed to represent. So I think that that's a very interesting perspective. You know, I think that there are benefits and there's value to technology inherently. The danger that I see with technology, at least the rate at which it is advancing, is that it has left open the door for power grabs for companies like Google and Facebook that now, like when they first came into, you know, existence, it was like, oh, these are the guys that are disrupting the system, and, you know, we have no more gatekeepers, so anybody can do and say and be, and like we have all this access. And then now you have issues with YouTube censoring, YouTube demonetizing, you know, messing around with search results and all kinds of stuff happening like that. Yeah, I mean, some people say that. I don't have any proof of that, although I also, you know, who knows? When you get the problem is that when you get to a large point, when you get too big as a business or a company, you exert control and power over society instead of just having prosperity for the individual. And that's that tipping point where, you know, if somebody has enough money to buy a really big house and a big car, you know, assuming they haven't, you know, broken laws or like killed people to get their money, then hey, they're welcome to have as much money as they can get legally and honestly. But there comes a point where when you control so much money that you're not impacting just yourself now, you have the money that you buy up a whole town, and now everybody else is, you know, kind of in your fiefdom, you know, a little feudalism lingo there. You know, then that creates a problem, and I think that that's what we are starting to see happen with technology, is that there are people in control of technology that didn't really get voted in or didn't get, yeah, the too big to fail, that's definitely part of it. That's kind of like the ass end of the pyramid, but I think that, you know, if you go even a few steps back from that, yeah, that's very true, and competition would help with that, which hits on another issue. I'm just reading Tiff's comment. We don't have enough competition, which hits on another issue. A society that's not pushing innovation because they want the big companies to buy their ideas instead of forging their own. That, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, on one hand, I can agree with that, but the problem is the companies that already got there have made it very difficult to innovate. I mean, from my perspective, I look at this a lot with pharmaceutical stuff. There are 3 big companies that control all the production of insulin, and they, you know, screw everybody else to the point where if you want to get anything through, they own all the market and they own everything. including lobbyists to the government, that prevents other people from getting in. So if I had this, let's just pretend, like this is a major fantasy world here in this hypothetical, but let's say I was really good at chemistry and I, put my chemical knowledge to making a new type of insulin, or maybe let's just say go one further and say curing diabetes, right? And I was like, look, I tested it on myself, it works, I got people that want to try it, I can put together a trial, let's say maybe even I got the trial through the FDA, we have this product we want to bring to market. It would just take so much money that you would have to be on that same scale, which they know that, and so they squash you or buy you, like you said, Tiff, that's the point you're making there, I think, is that, everybody wants to sell something to somebody else instead of doing it on their own. And yeah, I don't know exactly how to solve that problem. But even with all the best elements of technology, and I mean, I use a smartphone, an iPhone. I love social media, on some level. I love it to a point. But I think that there's an extent to which which technology changes us. It changes our society, and it gives us new tools to work with. And in the same way that, faster cars, better tractors, sharper buzz saws, bigger hammers can all have really useful implications, that there also is a learning curve, that if there's somebody who's used to turning the soil with, with a shovel and you just put them in a tractor, there may be a little bit of time that they need to really get proficient at that before you then bring in some automated system or what have you. My point is that technology moved much, much slower. Even though it was advancing, it moved much more slowly over the last, let's say, from 1800 to 1900, it moved relatively slowly. And then it sped up a little bit from, 1900 to like 1930. There was a lot of big advancements. But instead of even keeping going at that accelerated level, it accelerated even more. And then in the last really, 10 to 20 years, it's just like really hit an inflection point and just grown so rapidly that I feel like people have a hard time adjusting and understanding the implication of things. I mean, people put all kinds of stuff about themselves out there on the internet, and, learning how to navigate stuff safely online, and just how to be, and also like not dehumanizing people. Like there's a certain extent to which, like we see it a lot in YouTube comments, and I think elsewhere on social media, but certain platforms that tend to be more anonymous, like the asshat trolls that we have with us tonight that, come on here and just ask stupid ass questions that if we were all sitting around in a restaurant, they wouldn't pull up a chair and ask, oh, does it benefit photography to wear anal beads? And like, you wouldn't get that kind of stuff in a restaurant or a bar, because somebody would worry that they would get popped in the mouth, or that somebody would, perhaps just laugh at them, which for a lot of people that would be worse. Being ridiculed and being outcast. Whereas on social media, there's this, the technology has put this artificial barrier. Yeah, it was a comment that this troll, put in there. That's where that came from. But yeah, like you have that on here. But, in real life, that stuff wouldn't happen, because there is that barrier that the technology puts between us and reality, and between us and consequences, and there's a need for consequence. That's one of the reasons why I value climbing. That's why I value being outside. It's because there are very real concrete things that it doesn't matter, how good my gear is. It doesn't matter how strong I am. It doesn't matter anything. It's like, if I get hit by lightning, that's it. Like, that's on me. And there's nobody cares about, it's not like I can appeal that process of nature. It's like finite laws of nature that are just like, you do this, like cause and effect, consequence and impact, and it's very black and white, very concrete, and it's refreshing to have that in a world where everything is so subjective. And then also, I mean, granted, I'm tying in a few different threads that aren't necessarily all about technology, but technology has confused and has exacerbated some of these issues in some of its applications. Again, not all of them, but like technology infiltrating the social element of our culture with social media, and the internet primarily being one of those things. It's just like Pandora's box a little bit. And I think that ultimately, you know, we've hit a point as a society where I don't think we can really, you know, I don't see that bell being unrung, and I don't see people ever learning how to deal respectfully and productively with the internet as a whole. I see people going the way, like, best case scenarios, you have people who are lazy and who don't want to, don't want to push themselves and kind of take advantage of technology for those kind of self-serving gains. Is that being as a, that would be kind of the best case scenario, with the worst case scenario being people that are using it for violent, malevolent, hateful purposes. So that's my doom and gloom prediction. And Tiff, I agree. People need to start using their most ultimate and epic computer, their brain. And there's a point too. I think that I could kind of incorporate that into a philosophy that I hold dear, and I think is very relevant to photography, is that, like, there's a point where people spend so much time fixated on creating and acquiring new technology that they stop optimizing and getting the most out of the technology that they already have. And from resource management and just for general wellness and well-being, I think there's a lot to be said for taking something that is existing technology, that's not new, that's not flashy, that's not sexy, and using it because we have it, and because it's great, and because you can still do so much awesome stuff with it. And I think that's true for camera gear, and I think that's true for our brain, and for books, and I think there's a lot of appeal there. And who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope my bleak vision of society does not come true. Peter says it's been predicted by 2030, making a computer will cost about the same as printing on paper, a future where everything is smarter than you. Well, maybe that could happen, although there's a lot of other issues with the value of money and that whole thing that I think that play into that. Although, to be fair, I could see that being a factor, and knowing a little bit very personally what goes into acquiring the timber that gets put into the paper industry. That is hard work, and if people, I could see that effectively. I could see the cost of paper leveling going up to the point, and also somewhat computer stuff coming down, but to the point where there's not that big disparity. Yeah, Jason, totally agree. Probably why film has come back, because there really is there's something very special and nice about having a tangible thing, and within printed photography on that level, specifically in books, and in terms of the gear. I don't know. I just like the old gear, the old tactile gear. I mean, I don't really love this lens. Looks kind of ridiculous because it's like 9 inches long, and it's kind of skinny and weird looking. But most of the Takumar lenses on they're super. They're so nice tactilely. They just have such a nice feeling to them. I just like the way they feel. They're just very solid and heavy, Tiff says it may actually take longer than 2030 if they don't master battery life. They stifled that innovation years ago, and it's behind the source it powers. Interesting. And that's one of the reasons why I like these live streams, because I always learn stuff from you guys that are more plugged in, no pun intended, than I am to a lot of these other issues. Anyways, my friends, it is about time for me to have some food and drive 3 hours to Massachusetts, see my family for a couple of days, and then come back to chemistry class and start the week all over again. If you aren't already subscribed to this channel, I would love it if you subscribe, enable notifications, all that good stuff. And I'm going to do my best to keep bringing you guys good content, the best that I can, with the resources that I have available, and hopefully it'll be valuable to you. And if it is, great, and if it's not, that's okay too. So anyways, if you guys have questions, comments, anything like that, you can always leave that below. Happy to hear from you and discuss more as we go along. So very cool. Awesome. I'm glad I inspired you and gave you some information that you could use. See, now this is actionable, useful information. So awesome. Very cool. I'd love to know how that works out for you. Tiff, thank you so much. And I'm sure I'll see you around the internet, and anybody else that wants to chat about photography at Living Vertical on Twitter or Instagram. Always love hearing from you guys and chatting and showing you some of the stuff that I'm making. So take care, everybody. Thanks, and we will see you next week on another episode and eventually another live stream of the Adventure Photo Show. Later, guys. If I can find, there we go. There's the button.